everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Anne Longley, a digital strategist and organizational designer with Something New Together. My purpose is to help communities, organizations, teams, and leaders improve their digital capabilities within a culture where everyone feels valued. I've worked in the digital space for over 20 years across the private, public, and voluntary sectors, working inside big agencies and in-house with the DEC, the Prince's Trust, Lambeth Council, and Nesta Future Lab. I apply design thinking and co-design, not just for product and service design, but also for workplace culture design and social innovation. I'm here today to speak with Anne Light. Hello, Anne.
Hi.
Anne Light is Professor of Interaction Design, Social Change and Sustainability with Malmö University in Sweden, and she is also the Professor of Design and Creative Technology with the University of Sussex here in Brighton. And you also have a book forthcoming.
Yes, I'm working on a book called Designs to Reshape Humanity, because why pick anything smaller?
No, that's a very big challenge for sure, an important one though. And actually it's the purpose of our conversation, which is part of a series connecting leading academics and the digital design and tech communities globally and also locally here in Brighton via WiredSussex. And we're here to spark new ways of thinking and doing relating to design, technology, and innovation informed by academic research. And our dream is to build a community of interest so we can all learn from each other and increase our collective impact. This is an important initiative. I believe the tech community has a great deal to gain from academia and vice versa. So we're here today to break down some of the silos that sometimes exist between our worlds and explore this wonderful topic of how design can improve the world and reshape humanity. And we'll be following up our chat today with a roundtable discussion on the 25th of March. So we hope to see you there, and we'll be bringing more voices into the mix. So Anne, I'm really excited to speak with you and gain more insight about your work, why you do what you do, and how you came to focus on this topic. Over to you.
That's such a big series of questions. So I think that for me that I'm responding to two things. One is a long-term motivation in my research about how we can dwell together well and how we can do so better. So I think a lot of my research, which has been driven by trying to understand neighborhoods better and what makes them function, understanding sharing in the context of it as a social and environmental and economic good, and bringing these kinds of things to bear on an environmental crisis that's become so stark now that I think we also understand it not just as something which is affecting us, in terms of change in the weather and climate, but actually something that requires us to rethink how we live. It's not, if it were something we could have managed within the frame of our existing lives 40 years ago, we didn't, and now we really have to start radical change from a bottom-up perspective rather than just assuming that we can technologize through this. And I think, having always been interested in sort of how people relate and what we can achieve together, I've moved from it's a background that starts in arts and humanities, and then I got fascinated by the politics of design and moved into technology research. But now I'm in a way framing the technology research with the bigger questions, like what does it need to be? What kind of design do we need as we're going forward with a relatively short time before we're told that the baked in changes in our climate will be so catastrophic that we won't be in charge of our destinies at all.
So Anne, can you delve into your key ideas a little bit more? So we're hearing the sense of urgency, and I think it's something that we're all feeling. How do we forge a way forward? What is your vision?
So, I mean, as I've already identified, this rather presumptuous title for a forthcoming book. So for me, I think designers are in an extremely important relationship with what could happen, because we're used to thinking in terms of transformation, but we focused, I think, a lot on material transformation. And now perhaps we need to be thinking more about cultural transformation, because we're really now in a position where there's an awful lot happening in the technology world that is bigger than states. It's the big corporations are now bigger than most countries in terms of their economic power, and they're mandated by something that doesn't require them to think about the environment. So even if there's a point where, you know, as a billionaire, you feel that you want to give your personal fortune to solving this problem, that might still be in contrast to the way that you're creating society through the interactions of both the production processes that you're employing and the energy consumption involved in the doing of your work. But also when we're looking at technology, if we're seeing it fragment at all, if we're seeing polarization, if we're seeing a detachment from the kind of the physical here and now into realms that take us into places that are really pleasurable but distract us rather than focusing on what's important, then I think it's become designers' job to say, how do we refocus? How do we remind ourselves of what's truly important to us, not our sustainability in the sense that we want to conserve everything around us, because that may not be possible, but what do we value? What is meaningful for us? What do we really crave? What is it that's important? How do we respect each other? And those kinds of things, so that we go into this together rather than in competition. And I think most research shows that ultimately the competition is what actually destroys the potential for a future. So what may be healthy in a marketplace on occasion is not going to be the right response to something that's just like a very slow asteroid hitting us.
It's these are very big challenges, and I was struck by one of your quotes. I'm just going to read it. Design in its extreme functionality in service to big industry is both the handmaiden of devastation and a possible means of changing this fate. Our practice needs to propel us out of current modes of thought. Now that is something that when I read that, I thought, oh my goodness, you know, the last thing I want to be is a handmaiden of devastation. And I'm sure many people who work in our field would feel the same. Now, how can we actually make choices and align what we do with our values so that we can actually start to tackle some of these big challenges?
I think in answering that, there are kind of more kind of ideal answers, in the sense that there might be jobs that one wants to step away from to find other work, and that isn't always something one can do. So I'm working with a bunch of students at the moment, and they're telling me what they want to be able to design when they leave university. And we're also discussing the fact that to live, they need a job, and that job may not be shaped the way they want it to be. And that tension is going to be with us. And I think that operates through, you know, it's the tension in all our souls, in a way, that we have to exist in this system, and yet we're trying to make it a better place. So for me, I think there's the ideal thing is to do something which is, you know, has a discernibly green outcome, for instance, you know, where we're looking at things that deal only in renewables, or, you know, are mindful of how, you know, the circular economy is working, and push towards those kinds of things. Of course, not everybody's going to be able to do that. So then I think there's a question, particularly if you're working in a design agency, but certainly with your management around you, because designers are often the executors of somebody else's vision. They're making it work. How do you speak back so that you can show that possibly within a couple of years, because we're seeing things move so fast, not so much through the pandemic, but certainly if you think about the school strikes, which were just over a year ago, it feels longer, but it wasn't that long, or, you know, the birth of protest on the streets. Recently, there are books coming out urging people for much more kind of even more strident activity, because it's life or death situation. If that's the direction of travel, then I think it's really important that companies especially smaller companies that can be kind of caught in the whirlwind of other things that happen, are actually designing for that future and not for the status quo or just a continuation of what we think we have now. Because I think the consumer world is going to change quite fast, because I'm seeing it, you know, the youngsters are just responding so differently to the same stimuli as they would have done maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And if that's the direction of travel, then designers need to be the eyes and ears for their companies and help people see that the answer is, if you want to be on the right side of history, do this now, not when you're the one that isn't doing it, because that's going to be the competitive advantage. So I think that's one of the ways that we can do it practically. For me, my own personal mission is to think, as I've mentioned, about how we change culture. So I'm advocating that we think less about material production and more about how we change hearts and souls and bring people along. Because while there's a lot of injustice in the world, and I'm not seeing a quick end to that, we're in a position where a lot of people will be going, you know, but I haven't even got this, so why should I be worrying about that? And I think we either have to get beyond that or find a much more level playing field to work from, so that people can see that it's in everybody's best interests to be protecting, you know, areas of rainforest. And, you know, all the, I mean, this stuff is well known. I don't have to say what we need to be doing, but for some very apparent reasons, we're not getting leaders to make the decisions we need them to make. We're not in control of the kind of, what should we say, the kind of networked effects of what's happening in our world as it becomes so digitized. They're actually interactional effects that have just gone beyond anything that we can necessarily rein back in. And in those kinds of context, we really are just depending on people power and non-elected leaders who don't have to worry about whether people buy into their vision for a period until we can get the leaders in who will make these things happen. And for me, designers are perfectly placed because, as I said, they understand transformation and they're imaginative and usually very well motivated.
I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that have triggered some thoughts for me, and you said quite a bit just there. I suppose in terms of drivers for change, the young generation, that is definitely something that we're seeing. And I do think that design and digital talent in the marketplace has actually an incredible amount of clout, because these are the skills of the future. And these are skills, quite frankly, that companies are vying for. There's a bit of a talent war. So what I'm noticing a lot in the digital agencies that I speak with is they're defining their own cultures within their organizations to be able to attract this talent. So, for example, Red Badger is, a very excellent design agency, and they have created this initiative that came from listening to their staff called Mission Beyond, where they are actively pursuing social goals and purpose alongside their commercial work and building coalitions with others who are driving social change. I also know of digital agencies like Yo-Yo Design who've achieved their B Corp status as a business that has positive social and environmental impacts. Again, that is really about attracting young talent, young design and digital talent to their agency. And here in Brighton, Clear Left recently announced that their employees are owning the business, which I think is a fantastic initiative that just shows that employees really have clout and can really drive their own agendas. I also wanted to pick up on the concept of leadership. This is something very dear to my heart in terms of the work that I do in helping people develop their design and digital capabilities. We are all potentially leaders, and we can, by asking questions and by framing issues and the briefs we get and the work that we do, kind of try and push the boundaries of the scope of our work. So I think there's something there that it would be wonderful to explore with you further. And then finally, an idea I picked up from your work. You had a quote from Simone de Beauvoir about, you know, I'll just read it here. A condition brought about by a certain time can be abolished at some other time. It might seem that natural condition is beyond the possibility of change. In truth, however, the nature of things is no more immutably given once and for all than is historical reality. And you've got this wonderful phrase, the designed, therefore designable nature of the world. Could you talk us through that concept?
Yeah, well, firstly, I mean, just wow, I'm so glad you brought in those examples, because I think it, I mean, in a way, what I'm saying is not new. I'm just saying it urgently because we know this is the path of travel, and it's just about how we speed it up. And for me, part of that mission is to help people who perhaps haven't had the kind of education that designers and policymakers and futurologists have, where they are used to thinking in terms of things developing and changing, because people quite often just operate within the world they find themselves, and their design activities are quite localized. But I think to explore the designed, therefore designable nature of the world is to help us all recognize how things could have been different, can be different, and what the points are where we might make an intervention or just push harder in a particular direction, and give some sense of hope in agency. So not hope as just a passive kind of desire that it gets solved, but the idea that we are people making a difference. We don't make much of a difference by ourselves, but this is something that has united so many people. And I think the challenge is a little bit like, okay, we know we have to do something and we're not sure what we can do. And it has to be at a level that's suitably large. And that then looks very difficult for us. But the more small organizations that start to move in a positive direction, like, you know, like the way you're talking about, you know, sort of the kind of almost the guerrilla tactics within organizations where they see they want an alternative culture, even at home. And then how do we spread that out and make it grow?
I think it's just fascinating, the whole notion of how change happens and the grassroots kind of horizontal activity that we as citizens and workers, how we can exert our own kind of power and agency, that then influences the kind of top-down structures that we're seeing. So I just wanted to share a few things that I've noticed lately, you know, that give me hope. So, you know, we do see the climate emergency emerging on the agendas of national governments and local governments. And that is wonderful. They're starting to mobilize people and marshal resources. Business purpose seems to be coming more to the fore. It's more important. We see more and more companies talking about their sustainability credentials. Patagonia is one that comes to mind for me. I think they've been very good about their provenance of their products and even promoting the reuse of clothing and materials. One area that really surprised me lately, and it's kind of a sad story, but also a positive one, Rio Tinto, the mining company, you know, they've been very clear about their values for some time, and they breached them recently by destroying an ancient rock shelter in Australia. And actually their CEO and several executives stepped down. You know, they lost their jobs because they had breached their values. And just the other day, their chairman also stepped down. And they are working closely with the Aboriginal First Nations communities, who are really advocating that someone from their community actually takes the place of these executives that have left. And I thought, wow, that is, that's quite something to have this kind of thing go on. I think it's a positive sign. I've done a lot of work in the voluntary sector. I've been very fortunate to work with organizations like the Prince's Trust, and they have an incredible circle of support around them with corporate supporters who are trying to help the Prince's Trust with their digital strategy and how they use digital tools to help young people. And a lot of the tech companies that get involved, it's an opportunity for their employees to help make a positive difference. So I think big companies are starting to see this as really important. And then, of course, we've got some really amazing grassroots tech initiatives. A few that stand out for me are Tech Fugees. So Mike Butcher organized the tech community to look at the plight of refugees. And we also have organizations like DataKind, where data scientists are offering their services on a voluntary basis to the voluntary sector. And we know that data scientists are very, expensive. They're very in demand in the marketplace, and their services, aren't always accessible to the nonprofit sector. So those are a few initiatives that I see that bring hope. Now, in terms of your thinking, Anne, do you have any kind of methodologies or frameworks that designers can use? I think I saw one in your presentation, a way of questioning and challenging briefs so that we can actually not be the handmaidens of devastation.
Well, I do quite a lot of work in workshops looking at how things could be different, as I think I mentioned. I think one of the things that enables people who are particularly within the digital world, enables people to do is actually perhaps extrapolate into where the implications of their work could go. So one of the things we kind of, it was some of what we're seeing now is predicted, but it wasn't necessarily listened to. And of course, once you get into a competitive situation where you're trying to produce something that's the rival to something where the values are not good, you're kind of locked into something where you're committed to those kinds of values until it's regulated out, or it kind of the trend passes, or it becomes part of our infrastructure, our digital or even our cultural and emotional infrastructures. So how do we anticipate how some of these interactions might happen? And for that, I think the kind of workshops that I've been doing, looking at reconceptualization of time, what does it mean to go back a long way? What does it mean to go forward and imagine worlds that don't exist yet? And can we do that in the present? Because those kinds of things actually enable us to do brainstorming, and it's fun, but also to come out with ideas where potentially we're alive to the navigation we need to make, not just, as I say, in the kind of terms of energy and production values and how we use resources, because that's really important. But the layer that I'm drawing attention to particularly is, let us enable society, let us enable neighborhoods to speak to each other more and coordinate better. Let's enable people to feel differently, to connect, and to be able to take it on board enough, but not so much that it becomes overwhelming. And if we're looking to the cultural transitions we need to make in making our digital tools and valuing the kind of the differences and similarities between people, bring people together in different formations, then as long as that's done with a mindfulness and a carefulness that comes from having thought about the world that technology creates, then we're in a really powerful position. But we are also working against big forces that are doing something that runs counter to that. So in some ways, the extra layer to this is, how do we make those things survive? Like small plants being nibbled by deer, you get the kind of fencing around it. Well, some of our initiatives need to have those shapes around them so that they don't just get nibbled away by the big competitors or the overbearing culture and its values.
There's quite a bit in what you've just said, so I just want to pick up on a few points. So for me, what you said about workshops and how we create experiences to explore different futures. And as designers, you know, we can be given a brief and we can also question and challenge that brief and you know, create space and make a case for exploring different opportunities and time horizons. So I think there's something very rich and powerful there. One thing I've done in my career on occasion is used the language of risk and risk management to get organizations thinking more about the impact, their impacts, and what some of the backlash could be. So from a reputation management point of view, and because I've done a lot of work in social listening, I've often used, what are people saying about you? How is this landing? Could this impact on your performance as a driver to make a business case to explore different futures? The other thing I was going to say is, yeah, just having stretch briefs and innovation around doing things differently and encouraging our organizations to make that part of what they do. So how do we take things further? And just asking those questions. I think the final thing I would say, and actually for me, this is really, really important, is just the virtue of bringing human-centered design to life by working with communities directly. So not working in a vacuum and a bubble of just designers and technologists, but actually working and co-creating with communities. That's where we're going to get so many rich and valuable ideas. And I know from the Prince's Trust, for example, the process of engaging young people in designing the digital platforms and tools, that really boosted their confidence. They actually, the process of being involved actually made them feel, oh, my voice matters. I can actually make a difference. So I do think that's an important tool for us. Does that?
Yeah, I just want to come in and enthuse and say, I think, also there's something here which you will appreciate with your background in practice, that how one does that, it's not just going out and presenting ideas and options. There's something, as you were saying, about really listening and gauging. So when communities talk, they talk in terms of a generation or a lifetime, not a business period. And you know, that those sorts of translations about what their concerns are, both the immediate concerns of making do, and especially with the pandemic, that sort of sudden reduction in vision because everything just has to be about getting through now, with how do we actually engage people in a much longer term thinking without committing to things that will be obsolete very fast because of the degree of change. And for me, one of the ways that I've been working with this is to start to think not just about the human-centered, but the more than human-centered, and in that idea that actually we've become so aware now of our interdependencies with other species and other parts of the world. And so it's easy, I think, still to be looking at kind of the developments from the last century to some extent, when we realized that if we made things without involving people, they didn't work. So, you know, we just learned that we had to do kind of user-centered design. And then it sort of traveled forward to something much richer. But now I think we're in a place where we have to lead, because not every community knows what to do or what is best in the way that ordinary a use case might create. This is about innovating beyond anything that we've imagined. And sometimes then you have to take people on a much longer journey. So this is when I think we go back to the designer as leader and visionary. And we may have moved away from that to some extent, because that used to be associated with like chic brands and it wasn't very useful. But now I think we're saying, yes, but if you are a visionary, how do you help other people find their visionary side and work together with that vision? So it really matters how you go in and what you do.
I think that's so powerful, the idea that we can bring our skills and share those skills with others and help them imagine a better world. And one of the reasons I was attracted to design in the first place is the inherent optimism in it, this whole way of questioning, how might we do this? And it's about how we apply design, which is one of the reasons myself professionally over the years, I've really come, like you, to be a big advocate of design to change culture, not just for product and service design, how do we make a better world? And linking it up, because it really resonated, systems thinking. So design on its own is not enough. If we marry it up with systems thinking and this more holistic view, we've actually got a very powerful tool set. And then I suppose the question for us, those of us that are passionate about this topic, is how do we build a movement? You know, how do we really create and share best practices? Any thoughts on that, Anne? Have you seen any?
Yeah, and how do we work out where in the system our contribution can be most useful and what might change? Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm sort of struck by both the need for vision and for really on the ground practice of making things happen and being together and linking and taking a step back from expertise. For me, one of the things that's been quite depressing about some aspects of environmental discussion has been always this discourse about scaling back, limits, don't do this. So my interest in sharing came from a kind of, well, what do we go towards rather than away from? Because, you know, we're consuming too much. So what can we go towards? And sharing, of course, is one thing we can go towards. So for me, it's to acknowledge that people are never happier when they're making connections and making things and making and planning. And, you know, and if we create a world where we've kind of inhibited people from that joy, and particularly designers, what are designers going to do if we can't make anything, you know, because it's what makes us excited, then we've just might as well not have, you know, we might as well not be doing anything if we were going to just live in miserable existence. So for me, there's something about, and this is why it's not designed to save humankind or designs to save the planet. It's very much about designs to save humanity, because right, for me, this wellspring of creativity that is in most of us, but sometimes a bit quashed, is the thing that makes life really energetic. Yes, it's great, you know, when things grow, and there are other aspects that really thrill me, but there's something about being in connection with that. And so for me, it's honoring that needs to come through. That comes through so that we're able to be creative selves. Then I think we cheer up, we find solutions to things, we recognize that they're not permanent because there'll always be something changing and we need to move with that. And we connect with others who are looking for the same or different. And it doesn't matter if it's different, because that energy is already moving us into the new world we need to move towards. And so I suppose my answer is a little bit contingent. You know, it's not that we can do a thing, but that we can love that creative energy and recognize that it might just be enough, that we don't need trappings exactly. We just need to be able to fulfill that with other people. And therefore, there is something about being a designer and a maker that puts us at the heart of understanding that process beyond knowing just what transformation is, but actually what that passion feels like.
And that sounds like that's your why. And that's very, very powerful. I feel like we're in a time of big change with the pandemic. You know, people have referred to it as the great accelerator. The time is right now for us to rethink how we do things, where we do things, who we work with, and really connect with our why. So I think on that note, it's a good time to wrap up so that you know, we can end really positively with a lot of hope for the future. And do you have any final comments to say?
Just that it's been a pleasure, and I know that your work has been in a really related area, and it's been great to be talking to you. Really valued this.
Yes, it's been marvelous. And I really look forward to bringing others into the conversation on the 25th. And I also want to thank WiredSussex, the University of Sussex, and the Economic and Social Research Council for giving us this opportunity, giving me the opportunity to meet you and for us to have this conversation and see how we can take things forward. So thank you very much, Anne. And yeah, have a great day.
I look forward to speaking to you next time.
Thank you.